When viewing certain films within the genre of tragedy or horror, for instance, why do people willingly subject themselves to feelings of pain, disgust, or even fear? This is one of the underlying issues we deal with over the next two videos. We will begin by looking at what is known as the paradox of painful art. We could state the alleged paradox in the following way. Number 1. People do not typically seek out situations that arouse painful emotions. Number 2. People have painful emotions in response to some art. And number 3. People routinely seek out art that they know will arouse painful emotions. There are a number of explanations we will offer up here. None of the following necessarily have to be seen as being inconsistent with one another. In fact, several of the following explanations go together quite well. Control. Perhaps we can tolerate painful art given that the painfulness of certain artworks is mitigated by our ability to stop experiencing them at will. I can leave the theater or change the channel if the film gets to be too much for me. Compensation. Maybe the reason we allow ourselves to experience painful art is because there is some greater good we get out of it. We expect that any painful reactions we have will be compensated for by other pleasures or values, such as the craft of the story or the awareness that we are sympathetic creatures that are responsive to the distress and pain of other creatures. Conversion. The audience's pain is converted into a sort of pleasure. This need not be sadistic. Think of the way comedy turns tragedy into humor. Power. Great films are inspiring. We enjoy the feeling of power we garner from overcoming the fear or the realization of humanity's endurance. This may be especially the case with horror. Rich experience. There are a number of other reasons besides the experience of pleasure that motivate people to experience painful art. Maybe we just want to experience a range of emotions without the trouble of the non-filmic situations that would normally correspond. Setting to one side for a moment why someone would subject themselves to painful art, let's look at the how. Most modern philosophers have focused on tragedy rather than comedy. It is thought that contemplation of tragedy can help us refine our ethical views and perspectives. Tragic films force us to consider higher ideals, such as justice. It is thought that tragedy invokes fear and pity, which are signs of our involvement within a larger ethical community. Tragedy reveals to us the fragility of goodness. Recall the film Saving Private Ryan. A tragedy, no doubt. However, the tragic features of the film cause us to both feel and contemplate war, loss, patriotism, the value of human life, and duty at deeper levels than we may have felt or thought prior to seeing the film. There is, so to speak, a point to the painfulness that we experience as an audience. Unfortunately, comedy and tragedy are often treated as opposites, with comedy dismissed as frivolous or lacking moral worth. It is said that the protagonist in a comedy is morally inferior to the audience, the butt of the joke. Think of Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm, or the 90s show he helped create, Seinfeld. Whereas the protagonist of a tragedy is most often morally superior to us. Is it true that the protagonist of a comedy is morally inferior to us? Perhaps. But is it not the case that often the protagonist is simply an outsider? This is something to consider in this week's post. Some of the best comedy films are, at bottom, tragedies. Furthermore, it seems that comedies actually make pain and tragedy palatable. Comedy has a way of putting a distance between us and painful circumstances. We get to take a step back, so to speak, and even find some delight in our pain. This can help us sort through or deal with our suffering. We've dared to look into the abyss, and we giggled thus. Consider how painful the plot of the film Raising Arizona really is. Oh, and spoiler alert, a convict and a cop get married in a fever, only to find that they cannot conceive a child. But as it turns out, A well-to-do family from the community has quintuplets. The barren couple decides to steal one of the newborn children. Eventually, there is a showdown over the baby between the married couple, a bounty hunter, and more convicts. Though the couple are victorious in the showdown, they decide to return the child to his parents. Now, as I've described it, the film could be a drama or even an action film just as easily as a comedy. Obviously, what makes the film funny is the way the story is told. The characters, scenes, and dialogue are so ridiculous and absurd that they take the weight of the incredible amount of suffering in the film off our shoulders. We will continue this topic next week as we look at the genre of horror. In the meantime, I hope this video aids you in this week's discussion post.